Good evening, football diehard heads. My name is Drew Phelps. I'm filling in tonight for Jamie. Pleasure to be here. Glad to be here. And I got to welcome in Eric. Thank you for having me fill in for such prestigious man as Jamie. So you got to tell me how things run and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a fun show. I'm looking forward to chatting with you, Drew. But certainly fair to say, big shoes to fill, stepping in behind Jamie. So, Jamie, we miss you tonight, but looking forward to a different
Yeah.
chat with you here, Drew.
Yeah, it'll be a little fun. We'll go through the kind of the same way you do, go game by game and talk about some of these matchups, guys we like, guys we don't, guys we're fading, guys we're jumping on. So who we're willing to pay up for and who we're not. So, but how was your week or how you're looking at this slate overall? What's your feeling on it? Do you like it? Do you think it's a tough slate? What do you think this week?
Yeah, it's a little interesting. I think that we're going to see rostership kind of more peanut butter spread across the slate, right? So, not so many guys that are going to be super popular. Not a whole lot of guys that are going to be generally unowned, right? So, a little bit more of a balanced build as we head into week 10.
I know I'm looking at the percentages on Football Diehards, and I mean the highest owned guy is only 18% on FanDuel and 15% on DraftKings. That's Amon Ra. So I mean that's pretty. Usually you see at least a couple 20%ers in there. Usually, don't you?
Yeah, I think Amon Ra is going to be up there from a wide receiver standpoint. There's a few running backs that should push north of that. I know that Dameon Pierce and Saquon Barkley are going to be popular, but ultimately we can't really get a super clear gauge or picture until we flip the page until tomorrow and those ownerships reset right before lock.
And also, there's so many question marks going into tomorrow. So many, like, we don't know quarterback situations. We don't know running back. There's a lot of question marks going into tomorrow. So that's what I'm most worried about before I officially set my lineups.
Yeah, we're gonna have to wait out some last minute news. Fortunately, a lot of those question marks are in the earlier games. Oh, I guess I should say that with a grain of salt. The 1 p.m. games, we do have a Germany
Yeah.
game tomorrow, so
Yeah.
the earliest of games is obviously not on the DFS
Yeah.
slate, but heading into the main slate, we should have pretty good visibility.
Okay. So do you want to get started? Do you want to get into this first matchup?
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay, so we got the first one we're going to talk about that we think is the kind of best one to target here is the Jags at the Chiefs. Chiefs are giving 8.5 in this game. It's a 51 over under. I think it all starts with Patrick Mahomes here. 7,900 on DraftKings. Are you paying up for this possible shootout?
So I want to get into this game in particular. I don't know if Patrick Mahomes is the way that I'm going to do it. You mentioned the price tag 7,900 is pretty expensive,
It's big.
relative to the rest of the quarterback market. Also, he's going to be popular, right? I mean, we're talking about this game first because it's going to be a popular game, but a quarterback pushing 16% rostership, right? Like usually a chalky quarterback is like 11 or 12%, right? So he's one that I'll be watching the ownership projections in the morning. If he settles down into that kind of low double digit range, probably be right along with the field. If not, I'm probably going to be fading him a little bit underweight.
I kind of like him. I'm willing to, especially in like cash. I'm willing to play him in there, but I agree in GPP with the way this is set up this week, it is really hard to get a big top price quarterback in there to like fit it in to feel comfortable personally.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the pricing has gotten tighter week over week, right? So we're not seeing as many missed prices. So to pay up at a position that's a bit commoditized, it makes it tough for the rest of your build.
So the guy I'm targeting that I really like this week in this game is Juju. The dude is only 6K and three straight games. His catches have increased each of the last 3 weeks, 5, 7, and 10. And he's averaged 108 yards over that 3 game stretch. So I love Juju at 6K personally.
Yeah, Juju's a really interesting one. He kind of lines up as a perfect under the radar target. He's a guy that you mentioned his role has been expanding in this Kansas City offense week over week, but also even before he was seeing his targets increase, Kansas City really likes going to Juju in the red zone. Right, they're finding and scheming a lot of ways for him to get open when they're in scoring position. He has a ton of catches where he's tackled at the 1 or the 2.5, right? So,
Yeah.
if he's being used that way and his volume's increasing, down at 6K, it looks like they're going to be without Mecole Hardman tomorrow. A lot of things to like about what Juju can offer.
Another reason I like him, no McCall Hardman looks like. No Hardman this week. So that's another
Right.
reason you got more volume going his way. So the only thing is I don't want to touch any of the running backs. I don't think you would either. There's nothing that I want to touch in this game as far as running backs.
Yeah, at least on the Kansas City
On
side,
the Kansas
right?
City side, yeah. Are you
Edwards
willing to go to
Helaire
ETN?
and yeah, I think I am. He's going to be one of the more popular running backs. I see him
Yeah.
projected around 18% ownership. So, even that's not, it's not going to kill you. And for just how involved he is in this offense, I mean, I think his price tag is fair, right? I would be comfortable paying upwards of 8K for him. He's sitting at 7.1K right now. If his rostership was pushing 25 or 30%, I would want to try to come in under him. But I mean, at 18%, I'll probably go overweight because he's got so many ways to get there, right? Jacksonville is going to want to try to control the clock and keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands early. So a lot of rushing work for Travis Etienne on the front end, if or presumably when, given the fact that they are considerable underdogs in this game tomorrow when they fall behind. He's obviously very involved as a pass catcher out of the backfield. So ETN is right now projected to be the most popular player in this game. But even with that, I'm still on board. I'm happy to come in at or even above his 18% projection.
Personally, I'm going to probably stay away. I don't love him just because if you look at the Chiefs, they're actually pretty good against stopping the run. I'm not going to count Derrick Henry because Derrick Henry's just crushing everybody right now. But a similar back, Austin Eckler, only had 39 yards against this team. They're top 5 against the run overall. So I do get a say, but like you said, he can get it in other ways. So I don't mind playing him. I'm just personally going to stay away. I actually really like Christian Kirk in this game. I don't know if you do, but he's had two pretty good games the last 3. 7 for 96 a couple weeks ago against the Giants, and then last week 8 for 76 and a touchdown against the Vegas. So that slot guy really does well against this team. So I like Christian Kirk a lot.
Yeah, Kirk's an interesting one. He should certainly be the player to lead the Jaguars in targets and in receptions this week. His role is expanding in this offense. He exploded onto the scene to open the season. Then he sort of tapered back down and kind of fell off the radar. Really in correspondence with the emergence of Travis Etienne. But your point's spot on, right? Over the last couple of weeks, we're seeing those targets continue to walk back up. His matchup, he should see Snead out of the slot. It's kind of so, right? I mean, Snead grades out
Yeah,
pretty
it's nothing
well,
special.
but he allows a catch rate at about 70%. So
Yeah.
slightly favorable matchup for Christian Kirk. So definitely don't mind the call there. And again, I talked about it with ETN, right? This is a game script where Jacksonville is
Mm-hmm.
probably going to be trailing and throwing a fair amount.
Yep, and he's only 5,900 on DK, so that's a pretty nice price tag for a guy like that. Is there anybody else you particularly wanted to talk about in this matchup before we moved on?
Yeah, I think we need to talk about Travis Kelce, right? It's been a few weeks
Okay,
since we've had one of these upper echelon tight ends on the slate, right?
yeah,
The last few weeks, it's been the
I kind of
Zachariases of the
consider him a
world have
given.
been,
I kind of consider
yeah,
him a given every
and
week.
at 7.8K, I mean, look, he's always going to be a safe cash play, right? Like we were talking about with Mahomes, whether or not you can get up there, from a price tag standpoint to spend almost 8K on your tight end makes things a little bit difficult from a tournament standpoint. What I will say though, spending up to get different is a time tested strategy, right? So if you want to spend up on Mahomes and stack him with the Travis Kelce, the matchup is favorable enough, and that combination, spending 16K approximately on those two players is not going to be a very common choice. So don't mind paying up for them, especially together. But it will cut your workout for you with the rest of your lineup.
I like that. So you ready to move on to game 2? Ready to move on to game 2?
Yeah, I think that touches them all. Evan Ingram is a fine punt option, but you're rolling
I
the
am
dice
so
like you
done with
are with.
him. I think I got screwed with
Yeah,
him last week. I'm done. I'm moving on from Ingram personally.
I mean they call it a punt for a reason, right? You're
Yes.
definitely rolling the
Yeah.
dice, but
Yeah.
3.3K. If this is the week he falls into the end zone, he can pay you off. If not, you're probably looking at a 3 for 30 type week like you are with most tight ends.
Yep. Yep. You got to find that touchdown guy. You just got to find that golden ticket with a guy getting a touchdown. So the next game we're going to talk about is the Vikings heading to Buffalo. This is one of those ones that's got some question marks around it. Vikings are getting 3.5. It's a 42 over under. This game's really tough to judge because, like I said, we don't know what's happening officially with Josh Allen. He's questionable right now. I think most assume. I think most assuming that he's not going to go, and you're going to have Case Keenum going. Which, by the way, you got a revenge narrative there, and another revenge narrative of Stephon Diggs in this matchup. So, let's assume Case is going. Do you still feel comfortable playing Diggs at 8,300?
I kind of do. Right now, looking at the ownership projection, a lot of what I'm seeing is telling me the story that just about everybody is anticipating Josh Allen will be out, myself included. I
Yeah,
don't think we
I don't
see
think
him
he's going to play.
tomorrow, right? But you talk about a player like Stephon Diggs, right? One of, if not the best route runner in the league against a Minnesota secondary that is plenty favorable to opposing wide receivers. I mean, he's going to push low single digits in terms of his ownership. That is insane leverage, right? In the context of the last game we were talking about, obviously he's not going to fit too well in your Kelsey Mahomes stacks. But if you talk about a guy that legitimately can lead the slate in scoring at his position every single week, playing with a backup quarterback, granted, but in a good matchup, a backup quarterback that he has very good rapport with, right? They were last time they played together, they were going to the NFC Championship game. At that kind of 5 to 7% ownership. I mean, that's the type of leverage play that I love in a tournament.
Yeah, and they do have a connection. It's not like they don't know each other already and don't know their tendencies. So it's not like there's the first time they played together. So you got to also take that into account. Also, the Vikings are missing Dantzler now he's done on IR. So that's another secondary piece gone for them. So that's going to be a big hit to them. So you're looking at the run game. I don't think there's really. Maybe you might see a little bit more of Singletary without the Mahomes factor because without Josh Allen because he doesn't he's not going to run the ball. Keenum's not going to run the ball the way Josh Allen does. So do you see maybe a little bit more from Singletary this week?
Yeah, I think probably the better way to put it is I think we see more out of the Buffalo running backs this week, right? Some
Yeah,
of that
whoever it
will go to
is. Yeah.
Singletary. I think we see Cooks in the mix. We'll both Cook, but James Cook's in the mix. Potentially, so we see a little bit of Naheem Hines rotated in
Mm-hmm.
here. I do think the game plan will be modified to where they're running a bit more, but also you have to account for Josh Allen himself, right? He's a quarterback that last I checked had the fourth most designed runs in all of the NFL, right? So even if their game plan in terms of their run pass split doesn't change much, almost all of those rushes that Josh Allen was taking will now be distributed amongst the running backs in Buffalo.
Would you consider in a GPP paying down and throwing Keenum in there at 5,000?
I don't know if I would do it in a GPP. I wouldn't mind it in a cash game actually.
Yeah,
Right, like
I think the
for me
floor
in a
is good on him.
tournament,
I think the floor is good.
yeah, his path to getting 12 or so points is pretty well clear, right? This is still a very loaded Buffalo offense, right?
Yeah.
So obviously he's not going to be Josh Allen, but I think he's going to be able to move the ball. And Minnesota, by most accounts, has really been pedestrian, against really all facets of opposing offenses. They're number 9 in points per game to opposing quarterbacks specifically, right? So, I like his path to get to like 12 to 15 points, but in a tournament context, I mean, you just need more upside, right? Value's fine in a pinch, but I don't know if he has that 4.5, 5, 6x upside that I would want to put him in my player pool for a tournament.
Like with Josh Allen in there, I would be more. keen to maybe taking the shot in a GPP on Gabe Davis, but with him in there with Keenum, I don't think I want to touch Gabe this week. I don't want to take that roller coaster ride this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, Gabe Davis is a roll of the dice week in and week out, right? He will be wide receiver 48 or he will be wide receiver 3 and nothing else. So his likelihood of hitting the top side of that range is obviously markedly lower when it's Case Keenum under center. So
Yeah.
definitely don't mind fading Gabe Davis this week.
So looking at the other side of the ball, let's look at the Vikings. And you got, Dalvin Cook's always going to get his workload. We saw a huge love for Hawkinson in his first game last week. 9 targets, 9 catches. In this matchup, I kind of like him. The other guy that you have to take in account is no Jordan Poyer again this week. So he's not there over the middle. And I think your deep threats are going to have some opening. They've been susceptible to the deep play since Poyer's been out. So I like Hawkinson. And I really like, as a flyer in a GPP, KJ Osborne in the deep ball. Just throwing it out there as a possible dart throw.
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on that Poyer has really been a line of demarcation for how this defense has performed this year. And you look at it from an individual matchup standpoint, right? Like there aren't really many guys on in this Buffalo secondary that are that are prone to locking down other players, right? They're all allowing catch rates in the 60 to 70 to 78% range. Their grades are, relatively pedestrian overall. All pushing, right around, if not more than a yard per route that they cover. So, this Buffalo secondary can be exploited. And while I love the idea of throwing a dart at KJ Osborne, in a GPP context, I mean, you look at Justin Jefferson. I was
Yeah.
raving about Stephon Diggs being 7% owned. Jefferson's projected to be sub 5%, right? Like this, there are a few players, we've talked about it a few weeks ago with Cooper Kupp. Like you see some of these elite guys pushing low single digit ownership, and you start to salivate, right? So he's one that I'll be watching closely. I don't love the game setting for him necessarily, but if I get to the morning and these projections refresh and he's still in that 5% range, I'm going to be way overweight on Justin Jefferson
Yeah.
tomorrow.
I mean, I play him almost every week because I just love the guy. He's always involved. They finally figured it out, except there's this 2-week lull there early in the season where they just didn't get him involved in the game anymore. But he's just so good. I've drafted him everywhere in my season long leagues. I love the kid. So I'm always willing to play Justin Jefferson. It really does. He's matchup proof to me, kind of like a Cooper Kupp. So what about Cousins? Do you kind of like Cousins at all in this matchup? Because he's going to have to throw. So I kind of like Cousins a little bit. Not a guy I'm like really targeting though.
Yeah, I'm not really going out of my way to get him in there, right? This Buffalo defense, coming up against quarterbacks is above average in terms of the point scoring that
Also
they're
playing
allowed.
in
So,
Buffalo too.
right, and this is a game where I think that we could potentially see Minnesota, either try to establish the run and really try to take control of the game early on, or even potentially get up with a lead and really try to salt it away. And Cousins, he's just kind of in this middle ground, this no man's land from a pricing standpoint that I'm not trying to get into. He's 6K flat, but also where he is best is when he is in very favorable matchups and he's in circumstances where he's having to throw to get back into a game. And neither of those boxes are really checked in this particular setup.
Yeah, I mean I completely agree. I think I'm good on this game. Is there anything else you wanted to hit personally?
The Minnesota Vikings defense are projected to be the chalk this week. They're pushing 12%.
Yes. If Allen doesn't play, it's it's an automatic play.
Yeah, 2.2K. I mean, you can't pass up on that. I don't really like them to necessarily boom, right? I don't think we're really looking at a multiple turnover kind of defensive touchdown type of performance because the Minnesota Vikings defense isn't really that. But their path to paying off a 2.5K salary is super clear, right? They can easily get to
Yeah.
6-7 points, and they are one of the places that you can spend down to try to go up and invest in a guy like Diggs or Jefferson or like the Kelsey Mahomes stacks I mentioned earlier.
So real quick before we move on to the next game, we do have a question that's got a couple guys in this matchup. He needs to TJ T Warrior start two Hawkinson, Mahomes. Darnell Mooney, Mac Hollins, and Gabe Davis. He has to start two in a 12 team PPR. Personally, I don't mind going Hawk and Davis in this one personally, but that's just me.
Run me through the back end of that setup.
Okay, he can
Hawkinson,
start
Davis,
two.
Movie.
So
Mhm.
start two: Hawkinson, Mooney, Mac Hollins, or Gabe Davis. You can start two of them.
I'm probably going Hawk and Mooney there.
You like Mooney?
I mean, the
Okay,
matchup against
it's a
against
good
Detroit
matchup.
is very favorable.
Yeah, we're gonna get to
Um,
that in a few minutes. That's a good matchup. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. With Davis, like we touched on, right? Like he's so boom or bust. His odds of hitting the boom this week are incrementally lower. So I'll
Okay.
I'll go with a bit more of a steady performance from Mooney.
I will go with you on that one. So game three, this one I absolutely love. I'm going to be all over this matchup. I love it's the Browns going to Miami to face the Dolphins. Browns getting 3.5. It is a 49.5 over under. By the way, I love that over in this game. Just as a side note, but this is definitely a stackable game for me. A lot of options, and it's just not just the obvious plays. I mean, let's start with Tua and Tyreek. Would you rather pay for two at 6,700, or pay all the way up at 9,100 for Hill, or stack both?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been clearing green screens all season. Really going for the two triple stacks. Right, we opened the season with that in week two, coming up against the Ravens, and have really been going back to that well about as long as two has been available on the slate. Right, so we talk about the Kelsey and Mahomes stack. That one pushes 16K. This one, saves you a couple $100 under that. So don't mind spending up here. And I mean, it's really it's the cheat code, right? It's kind of
Yep.
funny. I've talked about it with Jamie before. I always pictured Waddle to be more of the high volume kind of possession role in this offense, and Tyreek Hill to be
The other way
the
around.
big play field stretcher, and it is quite literally the other way
Yeah,
around, right? So
it is.
we saw Tyreek get into the end zone last week, which was great. So we know that he has that scoring upside. 9.1K is fair for him, right? It's expensive. Don't get me wrong, but
He's the best player in
he
fantasy right
can
now. That's
routinely
plain and
pay that
simple.
off. Yeah,
He's the best player in fantasy. Plain and simple right now. Can you hear me?
yeah. I can
Oh,
don't
sorry.
don't mind don't
Oh,
mind
okay.
paying up for that 9.1K.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the other options here. You've got Waddle, of course. I like paying down a little bit and you get the Tyreek sort of numbers at 7,600 instead of paying 91. I think that's the other cheat code you can go with if you want, unless you want to get them all in there. But I don't really. If another guy I kind of like to target, and I think it's cheap, and I think you have a good shot, is Jeff Wilson as the running back. He looked like he's taken over this role from Mostert. I think Mike McDaniel trusts him more than he trusts Mostert.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? For me, Wilson coming into this Miami backfield really just mucks things up, right? They both know the system. Mike McDaniel is familiar with ways to scheme them open to get them involved. Ways to play to their strength. I think we're probably going to see a bit of a kind of hot and cold streak with both of these players. Last week, technically, Mostert outsnapped Wilson. Wilson was just a bit more effective. And honestly, the thing that kind of gives me pause more than anything, Cleveland's been on the season a pretty soft matchup coming up against opposing running backs. But you look over the last handful of weeks as they started to get more and more pieces returning to their defense, and they're playing in an increasingly difficult brand of football. Right? They're letting a lot of guys find the end zone, which is going to boost up their fantasy points per game allowed stats. But since week 7, they're only allowing 3.1 yards per carry. Right, So this is a defense that has historically been pretty strong against the run. It looks like they're kind of getting back into that form recently, coupled with the fact that it may be a Mostert week, it may be a Wilson week. These are things that just kind of make the running back situation for Miami a bit of an avoid for me.
And then, so do you like the Waddle over Tyreek if you want to save some cash? Obviously, you probably like that idea.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I'm I'm sounding like a broken record to those that subscribe here to the Diehards channel, but generally speaking, with all of these offenses that have two fantasy viable options, I almost always err on the side of whichever one is
Yeah.
less expensive. In this case, Waddle is not only less expensive, but he's also projected to be a little bit less popular. 15% as opposed to 12% rostered. So, if I'm picking one, I'll probably continue to go to Waddle, but I mean, really one of the most fun aspects of fantasy football in 2022 has been overload stacking this Dolphins offense. So I'll probably try to get all three before I try to make that decision of which one.
Yeah, obviously. So you saw what the Bears did last week against this Dolphins team. They had to score to keep up, and you saw Justin Fields go nuclear last week. That's why I kind of really like some options in this Browns offense. Like, one of my favorite pay down quarterbacks is Jacoby Brissett. Do you like Brissett this week?
Yeah, I think Brissett's kind of an interesting option, right? If you mentioned Fields last week, obviously he exploded, with 180 or so yards on the ground, but he also threw for a bunch of touchdowns, and it's not just last week, right? In their wake, these Dolphins have a lot of quarterbacks getting at, if not near, their ceiling fantasy production up against their defense, right? So I definitely like Jacoby Brissett to have close to a ceiling game, right? We do have to qualify that response. A ceiling game for
So
Jacoby
he's
Brissett
had
is
three straight
probably
over 250 yards games, by the way, three straight for him. He's playing much better than I think people give him credit for.
yeah, absolutely. With that, I still think his ceiling is going to be in kind of the low 20s, right? I don't think we're going to see a 30 or 40 point
No,
performance out of him, but
no.
very very much so. This is a setting where he can get that, and I think the way you set it up is perfect, right? I expect to see Miami be able to score the ball seemingly at will, like they have for most of the season, and they're going to have to play catch up. The Browns are, and a lot of that's going to come from the arm of Jacoby Brissett.
And if he's going to throw the ball, who's he going to throw to? I love Cooper at 6,500. He's had, the only thing that's kind of frustrating is him. He's had some inconsistency. So he'll have a big game, then he'll have a dud of like 40 yards. But this is just too good of a matchup to not love him. I love his prop too at 6,300, price at 65. I mean, I'm all over Amari. Like you said, if we expect Brissett to have a good game, the ball is going to go to him a lot.
It is, and it has, right? I mean, over the last 2 weeks have been kind of down for him, 7 and 4 targets respectively. But prior to that point, double digit targets in 4 out of 5 games. Very much so. In a comfortable rhythm with Jacoby Brissett. They're able to run these option routes and execute on them well. So definitely like Amari Cooper. What I like most about him in this context, I also want to get into this game, and of the skill position players of note, he's kind of the last stop, right? Everyone after him is going to be looking at kind of part-time roles. So to get someone that is heavily involved in this offense and is going to be pushing 8% or so of rosters, definitely like getting into the Amari Cooper business tomorrow.
I mean, it's too good of a matchup. I gotta love it. And the other one I wanted to talk about, you got to talk about Nick Chubb every single week. You have to talk about him. And I think as a nice kind of a sneaky ownership thing is, I don't think anybody's talking about him this week. And this is a good matchup for a running back. Just look what Justin Fields did to him last week. This is a good running matchup for him. And I think he might be a sneaky ownership if you don't want to go for the chalk play of Saquon, which we'll talk about later. But I think Chubb's a nice little play. It's a sneaky value and a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, and you look at Cleveland, right? According to PFF, the fourth highest run advantage in terms of offensive line versus defensive line this week. So definitely in a good spot. going to be in kind of the mid single digits in terms of rostership. And an interesting pivot, right? A lot of the pay up options this week are going to be at running back are going to be very, very popular, right? So you can pay up and
Mhm.
kind of stay in that class of production, but have a guy that has just as much upside, if not more, than anybody else in that range, and get an edge on 92% of the fields. Those are things that all get me salivating in a tournament context.
Anybody like a Donovan Peoples Jones you might want to throw on a flyer? Anybody else that you're liking in this game as a flyer?
Yeah, I think DPJ is worthy, right? Averaging over 90% snap share over his last two games. He's seeing his targets and specifically his receptions walk up week over week. Those down the field routes that he likes to run. Seems like Jacoby Brissett is connecting on them more and more often, right? He's continuing to increase not only his air yards but his realized yards, week over week. So for me, he goes from being kind of a non-factor to being someone that is certainly in the player pool. And if you're looking to attack this game in particular, he makes for an interesting run back. He makes for an interesting tertiary piece if you're going to overload the Brown side. So definitely in the mix, which was not the case as recently as 4 weeks ago, right?
Okay. Okay, I think we've covered that one pretty good. Let's move on to how about that Lions at Bears? Lions getting 3. It's a 48.5 over under. I mean, it all starts with Justin Fields at 6,500. Are you playing or fading? How are you handling them this week?
I'm probably fading a little bit.
Okay.
Um, the resignation you hear in my voice is that I see him projected at 17 or so percent rostership. I would expect that to be a good deal higher come tomorrow, right?
I
I
think
think
so
he'll
too.
be
I think that's
north of 20%. Being in that kind of mid 6K range, he's really the last stop of really elite upside options before you get into the Kirk Cousins and the Derek Carrs of the world, right? So I think he'll be pretty popular. I'll have less of him in my exposures than what the field is projected to carry tomorrow.
I agree. I'm gonna have him a little bit, but yeah, I definitely won't be overexposed. When you look, I don't want to touch anybody in the running back field. I kind of liked Herbert a couple weeks ago, but I don't like him now anymore just because Fields is just taking over that backfield. I mean, he's doing everything right now. Mooney a little bit, kind of like him, but if I'm going to like somebody, I kind of like Cole Kmet at 3,400.
Yeah, Cole Kmet at 3,400 is going to be a very popular choice, right? We saw him score, get into the end zone last week. He was kind of on a Kyle Pitts like trajectory where he had a very heavily involved role in the offense. He just wasn't converting those into catches and touchdowns. Last week that came to fruition. We all know in fantasy people love to chase last week's points, so expect him to be a very popular option. But with good merit at 3.4K, there's a lot of ways that he can get you there. There are a couple of pieces that I find interesting on the Bear side that you haven't
Okay.
mentioned yet. I'll start. Actually, I'll go
Yeah, go
back
for it.
to the running back room. Um, you know, David Montgomery, despite not looking like the more athletic or dynamic runner in this backfield, certainly not compared to Fields, arguably not compared to Herbert. His role in this offense is very well established, right? 4 straight weeks, 3 of them 15 carries. Last week, 14 carries. He's seeing about 2.5 targets per game. He's catching a good number of those, specifically against this Detroit defense that has been a turnstile against opposing running backs, and in the context of leveraging off of the Fields ownership, right? Everyone is going to be jumping all over Justin Fields. We all saw them. We saw what he did last week. Everyone's going to chase that. People aren't really going to be looking to anyone not named Justin Fields as a ball carrier for
It's a
Chicago.
good
So to
point.
get a guy
It's a good
that
point.
has a fantastic matchup is reasonably priced. He's 6K
Yeah.
flat, and he's going to be a quarter, maybe a fifth the percentage owned as Justin Fields. really interesting leverage, right? I'm not expecting him to pop, but popping is on his range of outcomes, and getting that leverage is something that you have to do to try to take down one of these large field tournaments. The other name that I want to mention, kind of surprised me last week, and that's Chase Claypool, right?
I was going to mention it
You know
too. I
the
was going to mention it. Yep. I
the
like it too.
story of the season for the Bears has really been one of pace. They were
Mhm.
averaging, kind of low 50s plays per game, offensive snaps per game through their first 5 weeks. Over their last four, they're averaging into the mid 70s. So, if they're going to play at this faster pace, we're going to see more and more attempts from Justin Fields and Chase Claypool. I mean, he didn't even play 50% of snaps, and he walked into 6 targets last week, right? If we see that snap share walk up to, 65, 70, 80%, there's a world where he could push for double digit targets, and he's going to be completely overlooked, at least in terms of what we're
Yep.
seeing on roster ship projection right now.
I completely agree. I've got him on my list. I've got him in a lineup already. 4,800 is a great price tag too to help you fit in some of these bigger price guys as well. And he has another week of the playbook. He's got another week under his belt. So I mean, I, I love him. I love him this week. So let's move over to the Lions side. You got Jared Goff. I mean, if you really want to play Jared Goff, you can play Jared Goff. I'm not going to play him, but the kind of like one I like is I kind of like Jamal Williams at 5,900. I mean, he's going to get the ball. He's always the red zone. I mean, he's always the goal line guy. Uh, I kind of like him in this matchup, and the Bears are not good against the run, especially without Roquan.
Yeah, the Jamal Williams is certainly the safer of the running back plays for Detroit, right? Chicago, as you mentioned, was already a favorable matchup to opposing running backs. Then they shipped out Roquan Smith, and they are equally as favorable as they are to giving up running back production with their own defense now. So definitely like getting into the running back business from these Detroit Lions. It's going to be infinitely frustrating, but we're going to continue to see a split workload between Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. And as long as that continues to happen, Swift is going to continue to be one of the more interesting leverage plays on the slate week in and week out, right? Because he has an absolutely electric skill set. We've seen him several times throughout his career take even a limited workload and turn it into a half dozen catches and over 100 scrimmage yards, potentially a couple trips to the end zone. So it limits the upside for Jamal Williams. I do think that Williams is the safer of the two options. But as long as they're in good matchups and we're going to be looking at a sub 5% DeAndre Swift, I'm also going to have him in the player pool and throw some darts that direction.
I agree, man. And then so the one guy I think everybody's going to talk about this week, as far as like on the Lions side, is Amon Ra. How much do you like him this week?
Yeah, he's in an okay spot, right? He kind of average to above average matchups. He should see the majority of his time lined up against Johnson. That's fairly even matchup, right? A 62% catch rate, about a yard per route covered. So, not really a whole lot of note in terms of his matchup, but his volume is just absolutely insane, right? He is going to continue to be the primary pass catching option for these Detroit Lions by a very wide margin for the foreseeable future, right? Until the point where we see Jameson Williams make his debut, until we, maybe
I'd love to see
see
that soon.
returns of, yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic, but not in week 10. So for the
No.
analysis on Amon Ra, right? Like, gonna be looking at, double digit targets pretty easily. Chicago, they look like a tough matchup in terms of the fantasy points they allowed to the position, but a lot of that has to do with the pace of the games that they're in. We talked about earlier when we were talking about Chase Claypool. That's getting increasingly more favorable as they're playing a faster and faster style of games. So, a lot to like about Amon Ra. 6.9K for his volume, probably a couple $100 too cheap for what you're going to get out of him.
Before we move on to the next one, we do have one about two running backs we just talked about. How about one guy, DeSantos, says Jeff Wilson, we're staying over Jamal Williams this week. What do you think?
I'm probably going with Jamal Williams this week, right? I'm very bearish on the Dolphins running back situation until we can get a more representative sample and they're in a tough matchup. So give me Jamal.
Okay. Let's move on to the next game. We've got the Cowboys against the Packers, the lowly Packers, who've just been it's an embarrassment what's going on with them right now. Cowboys are giving 4. It's a 44 over under. Cowboys coming off a bye. Packers coming off an embarrassing loss to the Lions. Basically, Packers are coming done at the seams right now. Is there anybody on this Packers team you're willing to play?
Depending on the reporting about his, availability or how much pain he's managing, Aaron Jones at 7.2K is fine, right? He's certainly the answer to your question, right? In terms of who you want to go out and play. Alan Lazard would probably be the second name to come to mind. He should see a good chunk of his snaps lined up against Diggs. Diggs obviously gets a lot of fanfare because he's a ball hawk. He gets a lot of turnovers, but he also lets a lot of chunk plays get behind him. So, those are the two. But even with those two, I mean, not a high degree of confidence in their output either way.
Rodgers going to get crushed by that defensive line. So I don't think he's going to get the ball off to them very often. That's going to be the problem.
He's going to have a rough day tomorrow.
So let's move to the Cowboys side. Who do you like on that side? Like, I like Dak. Zeke, the problem is with Zeke and Pollard, you know what's going to happen there. Pollard's going to probably get him down the field, and Zeke's going to punch it in on the goal line. So maybe play Zeke if you hope for get 1 or 2 touchdowns. And then, I mean, I kind of like CD just because he's going to get the target share.
Yeah, I mean, this Packers defense against the run is a pretty favorable spot, right? So I think it's an upgrade for both of the Dallas rushers, but the fact that we're talking about both of them, therein lies the problem, right? Trying to determine whose turn it is this week is going to continue to be a head scratcher. Green Bay's given up like 5 yards per carry on the season, right? Like I have been targeting running backs against the Packers weeks in and weeks out. The thing that is an additional degree of difficulty to this one is that we're looking at Fox's game of the week, right? 4:25 kickoff. So, there should be reporting about how heavily utilized Ezekiel Elliott will be in his return from injury. I'm speculating is a better way to put this, to be responsible. I'm speculating that we see more carries go Pollard's way. So if you force me to pick one of the Dallas running backs, I'd probably go Pollard. But we're not going to have that answer until every other game on this slate has kicked off, right? So you have to have some pivots in this game if the news comes out that it's wheels up for Zeke,
Yeah. So I mean, as far as the passing game, though, I mean, CD is going to get the most targets. I mean, do you like him? Do you like maybe taking a flyer on like a Michael Gallup in this game?
I do not. To your last question, I don't like taking a flyer on Michael Gallup, right? Lamb will see the majority of the targets. Gallup specifically, he's going to see more Alexander than anybody else, right? And we look at his recent production. He's allowing a catch on 55% of targets. Like anything 65% or below is very good at the NFL level. So to be all the way down at 55% against Jair, Gallup is in line for a pretty tough out. The snaps where he's not lined up against Jair because he doesn't really play in the slot, Gallup doesn't. He's going to be seeing a fair amount of Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas has also been a pretty tough out, a slight decrease or slight downgrade matchup for his opposing wide receivers. So, Gallup is pretty close to an outright fade for me.
Okay. I mean, what do you feel about Dak? Are you willing to play him? I don't love it. He doesn't move the needle for me personally.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, right? I expect Dallas to win this game pretty comfortably. For however much of a punchline Mike McCarthy has become, he does do a pretty good job of taking what the defense gives him, and that should mean a fair amount of ground game, spread across Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. So, Dak should probably have a pretty solid, kind of above average first half, and really expect him to see his role and his involvement diminish with each passing minute in the second half, and to be in that mid 6K range, and not have that type of upside of a competitive game where he needs to throw is a situation I like to avoid.
Okay. Let's move on to another one that this is another one of these games that you just have so many question marks. Cardinals at Rams is a 425 game. You got Cardinals getting 3. It's a 40 over under. We could actually see John Wolford versus Colt McCoy in this game. There's a chance we could see that. We don't know for sure yet. We haven't gotten the official announcements. Both quarterbacks are questionable. I personally think both of them play, but it's completely up in the air right now. How are you handling this game with so many questions? Like overall, how are you handling this game?
Yeah, so it's a lot of what we talked about with the last game, right? We're looking at a circumstance where we're not going to have word on this until very late into the slate, right? So we're going to have to keep close tabs on what information might be out there. If I had to put my finger on it now, I tend to think Kyler is going to end up playing. I don't think we see Matt Stafford tomorrow, right? Like, we don't see guys go into the concussion protocol in the middle of the week and clear it in time for the game historically, and certainly not in the environment of this year's NFL, where those head injuries have become a point of emphasis, right? I would be shocked to see Matt Stafford suit up tomorrow.
So if let's take that as that's what's going to happen. So Stafford doesn't go. You don't want to touch Cooper Kupp, do you?
So it's actually kind of funny. I was thinking about this earlier. It's hyperbolic in nature. So tongue somewhat in cheek.
Yeah.
Matthew Stafford's involvement in this game tomorrow, whether or not he plays, doesn't really change my outlook for the rest of the Rams, right?
Okay. Fair enough.
It obviously limits the upside of Cooper Kupp overall, but a lot of the reason why we're paying 9K for Kupp is that he is going to so consistently get double-digit not only targets but receptions, and he's a skilled enough tactician with the ball in his hands to potentially get good yards after catch and to potentially break one of those catches for a touchdown. So, his range will be tightened, but his role in the offense is so well cemented. And really the point that persists from that hyperbolic statement is that there's not really a whole lot to like about the Rams other than Cooper Kupp, right? So you ought to be avoiding them as it was. That doesn't change with Wolford under center, right?
Yeah. I mean, if Wolford's out there, I mean, this is a good matchup for the tight end. So Higbee, I think, is a little in play. I kind of like him. Also, any chance you like Kyren Williams is a dirt throw, cheap bargain basement to try to help fit some guys in.
I mean, I think that argument is sound on Kyren Williams, right? Like that is the reason why you would put him into your player pool.
That's the only reason why.
But I mean, look, you talk about all of the various running backs that have carried the ball for the Rams this year. Every single one of them has struggled mightily behind this Swiss cheese offensive line. I don't think that changes for Kyren Williams, right? But I mean, he's a young kid. He's looked dynamic in his in his college tape, so he could potentially break one. But that's basically the roll of the dice that you're going for, right? You're getting some salary relief, which is always a good thing. Maybe one of those, he sheds a tackle and rips off a chunk play. But, those are relatively low likelihood outcomes.
So, Higbee, do you kind of agree there's a maybe as a option this week? Is this a good matchup against the Cardinals defense?
So his matchup is strong, despite Arizona being very tough out for tight ends historically. This year, they're just not covering tight ends. My issue with Higbee specifically, even though he's in a good matchup, because that offensive line is putrid, he's been staying into block, right? 22, 20,
Yeah.
24 routes run in his last 3 weeks. That's down from an average, into the mid 30s, the high 30s even. So, I think we see him continue to block. So he's someone that I'm not really looking to get into my lineups at all. 3.6K, he's fine. The matchup is okay, but if he's only running 20 routes, like how far does that good matchup really take you?
Yeah, I got you. Now let's look at the other side. Let's say Kyler is going to go. I don't know if I want to play him, but you got to always look at D Hop as an option because you know how much he's going to get targeted. Hopefully, they've sorted out their little issue they had on the sidelines last week. Do you like D Hop at all in this matchup? Are you willing to pay up for him?
So I like D Hop as a player on the Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if I'm going to go up to 8K for him. The thing with DeAndre Hopkins this week is whether or not he's going to see a fair amount of Jalen Ramsey. Ramsey's shadowing days are largely behind him. But when you're talking about a Rams team that's going to need to rely on their defense, maybe this is the week where we see them, kind of go back to those old tricks for Ramsey. The hesitation with Hopkins is really much more about his price tag than anything else. But there are a couple of compounding factors that just don't have me feeling good about firing him up. I mean, maybe in cash, 8K, he's got a path to getting enough targets to paying that off. But there are more things working against him
Yeah.
than in his favor, and there are plenty of better options at that price tag.
I kind of like I don't mind playing James Conner maybe as a cheaper option at 6,200. You like that at all?
Yeah, I do. I think Connor is probably the most desirable player in this game, not named Cooper Cup. I mean, it took him forever to get back to action from that rib injury. Saw somewhat of a limited workload. He was on the field more than I thought he would be. He was pushing 72% of snaps last week. He only carried the ball 7 times. He ran a ton of routes, which is kind of a head scratcher, right? Like he's more of that kind of between the tacklers type. But last week he ran 22 routes. He saw 5 targets. He caught all 5 of them. So if he's going to be involved as a pass catcher, I expect his snap share to stay in that kind of low to mid 70s range, but his carries to probably walk back up to the double digits. And he's not going to be on a lot of radars, right? He's going to be in that kind of 5 to 8% rostership range, and that's something that's always going to pique my interest.
Yep. Not really interested in Zach Ertz lately because he's getting his target share taken away by DeAndre Hopkins. So I haven't liked him the last few weeks. I mean, he got in the end zone last week, but I'm not that interested in him right now.
Yeah, I mean it's really been touchdown or bust with Zach Ertz for a handful of weeks now. Really, ever since his price tag jumped up, right? If he's going to continue to be north of 5K, he really needs to get a touchdown in order to pay that off. You look over his game logs. You mentioned he found his way into the end zone last week. He did the week prior. Got you into that kind of 3 to 4x range. The weeks prior to that, where he did not, he's coming up short relative to that price tag. If he was in kind of the mid 4K range, sort of like the highest of the pay down tight end tier, I think you can make an argument for it. But at 5.2K, banking on a touchdown in fantasy football is always going to be a risky proposition, and that's exactly what you're doing with Zach Ertz.
Fair enough. Let's move on to the next one. Now, I will admit, I did not write a lot down for this game because I have no interest in playing it at all. But it's the Colts at Raiders. Colts getting only 4, which is weird. And the Raiders, you got a brand new coach. And I just don't understand how you want to play anybody on the Colts side with Jeff Saturday and a brand new play caller running. It's never called a play before, Parks Frazier, in the game for the Colts. So personally, I'm not touching anybody on the Colts. I know maybe if Jonathan Taylor might be in there, but and the Raiders are a conundrum right now. One week it's Josh Jacobs is a great play, and then Devontae's a good play. It's just back and forth. It's so hard to call. I mean, I'm just gonna ask you straight: is there anybody you really, really like that you're going to play this week in this game?
Probably. And
Okay.
you mentioned him by name a moment ago. That's Jonathan Taylor, right?
Okay.
Um, you know, for how much this season has felt like a lost season for him, a lot of it has to do with injury. He's not carrying an injury designation into this week, and kind of like I
And
was
it's a good
talking about
matchup.
when we were
It is a good
discussing.
matchup.
Yeah, the matchup is certainly favorable, and like I was talking about with Stephon Diggs and with Justin Jefferson, these elite guys that are going to be in the low to mid single digits, they certainly should garner consideration. Um, you know, Indianapolis has become a clown show very quickly, but you talk about Jeff Saturday, skipping the line to head coach at the NFL level. You talk about first time play call. If I was a first time play caller in the
You're
NFL
going
and
to
I
run the
had Jonathan
ball. You're going to
Taylor,
run the ball. And they missed a good
I
point.
would
That's a
run
good
the
point.
ball with Jonathan
Yeah.
Taylor a lot, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if he's going to be sub 10%, I think that it's an interesting leverage spot. And look, you have to assume on the other side of the ball, they will get back to pounding it through Josh Jacobs again, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he had that 4 or 5 week stretch where he was just getting elite volume. He doesn't have nearly as favorable matchup as Jonathan Taylor does, but if we're talking about a game where he's pushing 22, 25 touches again, Josh Jacobs at 7.6K is flatly too cheap, and is someone that is worthy of consideration as well.
Okay. I like it. Do you want to keep on this game or we got to get moving? So do you want to get into the next one? Because I think there's not a ton besides those two that you really are interested in playing this game, right?
Not super interested. Foster Moreau is on the punt tight end
Fair.
radar. Same story, right? Low three
Yeah.
Ks. He's probably good for about 5 or 6 points. If he gets a touchdown, you're happy. If he doesn't, you're so.
Okay. Let's move on to that Saints Steelers game. So at least we have a little bit more clarity in this game. So we at least kind of know who's playing and all that stuff. I think it's hard to judge this one, though. The Saints defense has been good. The Steelers get TJ Watt back in the mix. He's the heart and soul of that defense. I think there's 2 plays that I am really big questioning in this one. Would I rather spend up and get a guy like Chris Olave, who I think is in a fantastic matchup, or George Pickens, who's going to be getting a ton of targets from Kenny Pickett at 5K? Personally, which one would you be more heavyweight on between those two?
Of the two, I would probably lean towards George Pickens.
Because of the price, right?
For Yeah, the price goes a long way. The projected rostership goes a long way as well, right? Olave, I'm seeing in the nearing 10% range. Pickens, kind of lower into that mid single digit range, 6% or so. But also, I don't think we can accurately articulate just how impactful the return of TJ Watt is, right?
Yeah.
He was an absolute game disruptor from on that defensive front, and Andy Dalton is not really the best under pressure. So
I
with
think the
that,
Steelers defense
I
is a sneaky play too in DFS.
Yeah, they really are. The thing that kind of moved me away from that defense specifically is it looks like they're going to be without Minka Fitzpatrick tomorrow. So, one
Okay.
step forward, 2 steps back. But at their price tag and at kind of 2% rostership or so, not necessarily a bad play, right? I mean, Watt is just such a menace back there that he can absolutely flip the game on its head almost single handedly.
Yep, I agree. So personally, the only reason I would say I go Olave is this is such a good matchup spot for him. Just listen to these matchups that have given up. The Steelers have given up. Gabe Davis, 171 and 2 touchdowns. A.J. Brown, 154 and 3 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, 129 and a touchdown. Nelson Aguilar had 110 and a touchdown against them. Stephon Diggs, 102 and a touchdown. Amari Cooper, 101 and a touchdown. Olave is top 10 in yards per route run right now. So I don't mind paying up a little bit extra to get him. But you are right. TJ could get to Andy Dalton. We know he's prone to the interception and stuff. But I do like Olave this week a lot. So that's just my personal take on it.
Yeah, he's in a fantastic spot from a matchup standpoint, right? I mentioned I'm worried about Watt. Really, it's an ownership play for me, right? If Pickens was pushing 10 and Olave was pushing 6, I would certainly click the button on Olave more. But we'll certainly see how that shakes out as these projections roll over in the morning.
So as far as like a Pat Freiermuth on the Steelers side, he's been getting a lot of targets with Kenny Pickett in there. Do you like him at all?
Yeah, I think he's kind of interesting, right? Like I was talking about with Ertz, right? He has that price tag that that really fits the bill. And with Claypool departing, not only is there just generally target volume that's leaving, but specifically red zone targets have opened up for Freiermuth. So not mad at that play at all. Really the only downside is that over the course of most of this season, New Orleans has been a pretty tough out to opposing tight ends. With that being said, they let Isaiah Likely score a very long touchdown to open the game last week against the Ravens.
But that's all he had.
They can still be had, right?
He only had that one catch though. That was all he had all night against them though.
Yeah. There were a couple of balls that he probably should have hauled in, but the point being, his role in this offense is fairly well cemented. He's getting high volume targets and opportunities, and the price is right. If he was $5K plus, no thank you. But at $4K, I would consider it.
Yeah,
4.2.
I like
specifically.
I like it. On the Saints side, I don't think you're playing Andy Dalton. Let's go. Should we even talk about Najee? He's just a non-factor. I mean, you just can't. And this is a good run defense as well.
Yeah, tough out. It sounds like the plan for them coming out of their bye week is to integrate Jalen Warren into this offense more and more. So, working against them, 5.5K is so cheap, right?
So cheap. I know. It's so tempting.
I don't know if this is the week, but there's going to be a week where Najee Harris puts up 25 points at 5.5K.
And he's going to help somebody win a millionaire maker.
Right open, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's going to help somebody win a millionaire maker. Yep. For sure. But I agree. This is not the week to do it. There is going to be a week. I completely agree. But I'm trying to think if there's any other real options that you like. Is there anybody else in this game that you are willing to play?
Yeah, I mean, look, Alvin Kamara is someone that is worthy of.
I'm sorry, I completely blanked on Alvin Kamara. My fault. I completely blanked on Kamara. Sorry.
Well, I mean, look, his price tag makes him a little tough. The Steelers are kind of middle of the road against running backs, so it's not a plus matchup or anything like that.
Yeah,
he's going to be popular, right? So he's a bit more of a cash game consideration for me, but. I mean, we only have to go back a couple of Christmases to see him, get into the end zone multiple times, and be that millionaire maker himself. So, don't mind him being in the player pool either. Yeah,
I mean, he's going to get those catches. That's the one thing we love about Dalton. He's going to dump down to him. As long as he's in there, he's worth a play. But as soon as if Jameis ever comes back, I'm not going to play Kamara anymore because he doesn't give him the ball. So as far as that's concerned, let's move on to the next one. We got game number 9. This is the Broncos at Titans. Over under 39. So low. But you know what? You wouldn't think of a game with 39 that has some targets. But I think there's definitely some targets on the Denver side here. The Titans give up the 5th most points to the quarterback position, 3rd most to the wide receiver spot, and now they're riddled with injuries. They're beat up on the defensive side of the ball. I don't mind paying for Mr. Uncomfortable himself, Russell Wilson, this week.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get to Russ specifically. His upside is just so limited in this offense.
Yeah.
I need to see him have an upside game before he's going to be in my tournament pool. From a cash perspective, I mean, he's a perfectly viable option, right? Sub
Mhm.
6K. This is a glorious environment as you laid out, and one game sample size. But it seems like Denver was kind of starting to figure some things out in their game before the bye in London, right? So, things kind of starting to point in the right direction for Denver, and specifically that price tag is something that makes Wilson cash viable in my mind.
So you've got the two receivers. They're basically the same price. Which one do you play if you got to play one? Sutton or Judy?
I would probably err on the side of Judy. I mean,
Yeah.
look, all of these matchups are fantastic, but specifically his matchup out of the slot is going up against Joshua Kalu, who's allowed a 92% catch rate. Almost 2 fantasy points per route target, route covered. So he should be able to haul in a very high percentage of his targets. And over these last couple of weeks, it feels like Judy is kind of starting to click a bit more with Russ than Cortland Sutton has.
I agree. I agree. I think it's you're fine either way, but I think they both have good games in this game. I really do. I think Russ. I think this is the wake up. If they're gonna do it, it's got to be this week. Coming off a bye, hopefully they try to sort some stuff out. They're hopefully more healthy, and they get a great matchup. This, if they're gonna do it, it's got to be this week. So I think this is the week you got to at least play one of those two guys in the receiver spot. Now you look at the other side. You do looks like we are going to get Ryan Tannehill back. Does that help Derrick Henry? Do you like Derrick Henry this week with him in there?
I do. I mean, I like Derrick Henry this week, kind of either way, right?
Yeah.
You look at the Broncos; they're allowing 5 yards per carry to opposing rushers. It's tied for fourth in the league.
They don't have Bradley
He
Chubb
should be able
anymore.
to. Yeah, they no longer have Bradley Chubb, so he should be able to absolutely abuse them. The game plan probably doesn't change a whole lot. I mean, obviously Malik Willis was attempting one pass in the second half of some of his starts, so I don't think that'll be the
Still
case for Ryan Tannehill. But he'll be there to keep the defense honest from a
honest.
passing potential standpoint. So that should help a little bit, but ultimately it's still going to be the Derrick Henry show, right? It's just whether they run the ball 90% of snaps or walk it back to 62% of snaps.
Yeah, true. With him in there, yeah. I mean, is there anybody? I'm trying to think in this Tennessee offense, which is just abysmal. There's no receivers to even talk about. Austin Hooper isn't a factor, so it's basically Derrick Henry and nothing. So, and the only other thing I want to mention was the running back position for the Broncos. Is either one of them? Do you want to touch anything in that running back core? I'm assuming not.
No, no, I do not.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, there are too many mouths to feed.
yep.
If a trend emerges in terms of usage, we can adjust course at that point. But for now, not going to be speculating in the Broncos running back room.
Okay. Let's get to that last game so we can get you because you're going to be going over to Football Diehards on Sirius XM in a little bit. So make sure people check that out. Don't miss that interview. I'll be going on with Mike and Bob, my buddies. So let's talk about this Texans Giants game. And we're breaking down DFS for DFS purposes. It all starts and ends with Saquon Barkley. Is he a must play this weekend? And you just got to eat the chalk, right? I mean, you just got to, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we we look at Derrick Henry up against this Texans
Yeah.
defense a few weeks ago, and there wasn't a price tag or a rostership that was too high to not make that a good play. We're looking at a lot of the same for Saquon Barkley this week, right? I mean, guess if you wanted to make an argument against him, is that Daniel Jones sees a fair amount of designed runs, but I mean that is a absolute sidecar relative to the involvement of Saquon Barkley in this offense, and the
And he's using
Texans are one of
38%,
the few
right?
teams.
Is it 38%?
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
his usage is through the roof. Texans
Yeah.
allowing 5.7 yards per carry. On a fantasy points per game perspective, the most favorable matchup, 33 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So
They're dead last in every
giddy up,
category
Saquon.
against the run. I mean, they're dead last in every
Yeah, they
category. I mean,
are.
it's just every week you just look at who's playing the Texans and you start that running back. It's plain and simple. So, but if you got to look at the other matchups in this game, let's start with the Giants side. We might get Kenny Galladay back. I don't think we're going to touch him. Darius Slayton. Oh, I saw your eyes perk up there. That's not for Kenny Galladay, right?
No, my eyes will remain unperked from
Okay.
from all mention
What
of Kenny Galladay.
What about Darius Slayton? Maybe seems to be his favorite receiving target over the last few weeks. Any love there at all?
Yes, I mean Slayton's a little interesting, right? I don't know what is happening in your build where you need to go speculate with Darius Slayton, but if you're there, he should see a good majority of his snaps against Derek Stingley. Stingley should be he's a fine prospect, right? But he's still a prospect.
Yeah,
He's a rookie in this league. He can be abused. But the
he's not
overarching
getting
point, like
he's not getting the calls that Sauce Gardner's getting. Like he's getting treated like a rookie. Gardner's getting away with everything right now.
right, and the bigger point, like there's no reason for the Giants to really be throwing the ball, right?
No, no,
So if you're looking for ancillary production, he's probably the best of the lot from the Giants, but you don't need to do it.
no, no. That's if you're grasping at straws and you really, really want to go deep. For the Texans side, how much do you like? Are you willing to play on Dameon Pierce? It's a good matchup against the running back against the Giants from the running perspective. Didn't get in the end zone last week. He is coming off. He is a little banged up. He's got a chest injury. So, how much are you willing to roster him this week?
He's in the player pool. I'll be underweight. Right now, he's projected to be the most popular player on the slate. He's pushing 30% rostership. So, at that figure on this size slate, especially compounding in some of those injury considerations, I'll be below that. I'll probably be pushing like the 18% range or so. I mean, he's flatly too cheap for his role in this offense. In the low 6K range. But if he's going to be that popular in a game that I think the Texans are likely to be trailing, there are just too many things kind of working against him to eat that kind of chalk.
Yeah, I think he's going to get game scripted out. But we kind of thought that last week too, and he still got the carry. He just didn't get in the end zone. He nearly was a touchdown away from having a monster game.
Yeah, he was. I don't think lightning strikes twice there,
No,
right?
no.
Is by and large on the back of a very impressive run. You factor that out, pretty pedestrian day for Dameon Pierce.
So last guy I would mention is Daniel Jones is just an option because this is a good matchup for him too. I mean, the passing is not great either. So, I mean, he could also, we talked about his running ability as well. So do you kind of have any interest in maybe playing him as a contrarian play?
Um, not necessarily. He's viable from a cash perspective because he's so cheap and gets it done with his legs so often. Similar argument that we were making with Russell Wilson, right? But not really going to be offering enough upside to where he's going to give you any leverage in a tournament. Um, and at 5.7K, or rather at 5% rostership, I should say, not going to be that kind of 1% play where he paid off for us a few weeks back against Jacksonville.
Okay. Real quick before we kind of wrap this up, we do have a couple questions I wanted to ask you off of our chat. So, what do you think
Get him.
of either Jamal Williams or Miles Sanders this week?
I'm probably going to go with Miles Sanders here. They're right next to each other in my flex ranking. Sanders is 38. Jamal Williams is 40. Um, both in solid matchups. Miles Sanders is much more of the primary back in his backfield, whereas Swift could potentially take a little bit of a bigger role this week. Maybe even potentially get on the better side of the split. So Sanders by a nose.
I like Jamal Williams. I like Sanders as well. I agree on that one. I think we both agreed, right, that we do not think Josh Allen is going to play. We had a question in there about that.
Yeah. I think he's on the wrong side of questionable. I would be surprised if he suits up.
I agree. Last one. Robert Mitchell wants to know: should I start Dulcich or Tony in the flex? He said my team hurts Walker, JT, Tyreek, Mooney, and Goddard, and the Eagles D. So needs Dulcich or Tony in the flex.
That actually brings up a good point. Greg Dulcich is probably going to be one of the chalkier tight ends
You know what? That's
tomorrow,
somebody I forgot
and
about. Yep. Mm-hmm.
for good reason. Um, I mean, I almost never go tight end in the flex, but I'll go Dulcich here. I mean, last week, even having the bye to prepare, Tony was on the field for less than 10% of snaps. Obviously, McCole Hardman being out should have him see a larger role, but I don't think he's going to see a large role by any means. So I'll go with Dulcich here.
Yeah, it's so hard to judge the Chiefs, and I'll give Patrick Mahomes credit. He said it before the season. You're not going to know who it's going to be every week. It's going to be a different guy every single week. That's going to get the percentage. The only guy I kind of trust week in and week out is Juju. I kind of trust Juju.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Well, thank you all for listening in because apparently I just actually got a message from Bob Harris that you got to get ready for your hit. So let's get everybody out of here. I hope everybody had a great time. I had a great time, Eric. Thanks for having me on. I'm willing to jump in whenever you need me. Okay.
Yeah, Drew, thanks for hosting. You did a great job. This was a fun show.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Emil, for helping out as well. And you guys